Hello, morning. So we are looking at a chapter in Rita Kothari's book, Translating India. And this chapter's title, Outside the Discipline Machine. So Rita Kothari is looking at the mechanics of translation in India, especially translation from Indian languages into English. So this is perhaps a companion volume to Translation as Discovery and Translation as Recovery. Those two monumental works by Sujit Mukherjee. So in this chapter of the book, Rita Kothari looks at both the background of translation in India. Okay. What are the elements, what are the factors which influence translation in India? What is actually behind the choice and the methodology of translation in India? Who are the readers? How is this readership created over the years? What is the history of this readership? And what is a necessary accessory to translation proper? Okay, what should the readers know about the texts that are being translated, about its the literary system in which this text exists, the history, the conventions of translations in these Indian languages. Okay, so Rita Kothari right at the beginning draws attention to the fact that Indian writing in English translation is a special category. Okay, it's called either Indian writing in English translation or Indian literature in English translation. So as we go along, we'll find that this category is often placed together with another well-known category, original writing in English, what is called Indian writing in English proper. Indian writing in not in English translation but originally in English, right? So that's what we are looking at. Okay. So who are the people who read these books, and what do the translators aim to inform them? That's the first question. Okay. So there is an academic discourse, Rita Kothari points out, which surrounds any translation. One has to know the impulses that led to the translation. What are the basic impulses? Why did these translators translate certain works? Did they have a common audience in mind? Did they have a particular audience in mind? So what are the situations in the market? Is there a specialized market for Indian writing in English translation? Yeah. So Rita Kothari right at the outset points out that there is indeed a market. Okay. And there is indeed a category of readers who are called general readers, not specialized readers. Because quite often literary works are not treated as a specialized category in translation. Anybody can read, for instance, a translation of our first novel, Indulekam. Anybody can read a translation of Arogya Niketanam, okay, Vimal Mitra's classic in Bangla, okay, so on. So this is what is observed at the ground level. And there is a certain category of readers who cater to whom the translator caters. And of course we know that this readership is basically the English educated middle class, and they are scattered all over the country. So a Tamil reader reads Vaikam Muhammad Bashir in translation, just as a Bangla reader does. A Malayali reader reads Mahashweta Devi in translation, just as a Tamil reader reads her in translation, Tamil translation of course, and in English translation. Both a Malayali reader and a Tamil reader can read Mahashweta Devi in English translation. And this audience has been growing, we find. Okay. So, Rita Kothari notes that there is a proliferation of translation into English from Indian literatures after the 1980s, and very vigorous after the 1990s. Although we know that Britain had been ruling India for more than 150 years. I mean, at least parts of India. And if at all there was translation was mostly from English into Indian languages. The giver is the more powerful cultural identity. The taker, of course, is a marginalized identity. Any one of the linguistic communities of India. So, after 1947, when the value of the work translated increased, that is, there was an urge to make our works available for the English readers in the West on the one hand, and of course the more important thing was, as Sujit Mukherjee said, you have consulted Sujit Mukherjee's book. He was talking about English as a literature, not English the language, but the translations of Indian writing in English as a body was called a link literature for India. So this kind of urge to translate, the proliferation of such translations after 1980 and more vigorously after 1990 shows that this process is on. Okay, and of course there is an increasing number of readers in English. English education is becoming more widespread. Okay, so probably just as Sujit Mukherjee said, you can take this as an instance of the urge to create a certain kind of national literature in translation, of course, right? So along with this great proliferation of translation, Rita Kothari notes that some events happening in India, political events, like for example the breakdown of the monopoly of the Congress as a ruling party in India. First in 1977, during the first non-Congress government in India, led by the Janata Party, and later on by a number of political formulations, including the BJP. In 1989, a Janata Dal government with outside support from both BJP and the left parties came to power in India. So, and a number of regional parties were coming into being. Of course, in Tamil Nadu, the DMK and the AIDMK were there already. But in Andhra Pradesh, you have the Telugu Desam Party. In Bengal, a little later, of course, the Trinamool Congress. In Orissa, Biju Janata Dal. Like that. Okay. Regional parties. And of course, caste-based parties. The Samajwadi Party, which represents the other backward communities, castes. And the Bahujan Samaj Party, PSP, representing Dalit communities. So, in other words, there was more representative democracy on the ground level. Okay. Now, this was not the only thing. Many things were happening to India's economy. India was being liberalized. In other words, it was being globalized. More goods and services were available from outside. Okay. And one of the big fallouts of this process was the increasing Anglicization of education. More and more English medium schools were coming into being. Job opportunities were increasing outside India. And, more important, globalization brought in what is called a revolution in printing technology. What we today call the desktop printing or DTP. Not the old kind of printing with blocks and big cumbersome machines. Okay, you have to prepare a block and the paper has to roll over that. Very problematic. Okay, whereas in DTP you can just you can just type it in your computer, then get a plate prepared and the paper will simply roll over it. Process is so easy. You don't need those people called compositors who used to take each single font, keep them on a frame, take another font, keep it next to it. It's a very tiresome process. So printing technology was changing. Printing technology was changing. Printing was becoming a glamorous industry, and books from abroad were available in plenty. There were Indian editions of books in English, of course, largely in English, but also other languages like Arabic or Russian. They were being made available in India. So the market for English books increased. Yeah. Both imported books or books even written or translated by Indian authors into English. Okay. So, and besides this, a big readership who catered to not knowledge textbooks but fiction. So before 1947, if you write originally in English, you wouldn't expect it to sell at the most more than 1,000 copies. But look at the readership of some of our authors in English. Chetan Bhagat has sold lakhs and lakhs of copies of his books. So the demand for fiction written in English, okay, which can be placed alongside the possibility of translating Indian works into English, works in Indian languages into English. The demand is already there. There is a readership who caters to books in English, and they are books in English are made available both by importing books from abroad and by writing them in India. Right? So here you are. You're getting books. You're getting books either by producing them here indigenously or importing them from outside. Right? So I'll go back and tell you that if you translate from an Indian language into English to an Indian audience, even if it's for an Indian audience, you need to tell them what is happening at the ground level. What is happening in the original literature? What is happening in Tamil literature? If you translate Perumal Murugan's Ardhanarishwari, okay, as one part woman in English, you have to tell the reader about the controversy that surrounded this book when it was first published in Tamil. Okay, because conventional thinking, traditional societies do not approve of transgenders. We know that. So an audience has to be told about the controversies which this book ran into. Why was it blocked for some time? Why was the author threatened? Right. So we have to take all these together. The increasing readership, the possibility of creating an Indian national literature through translation. In fact, if you remember Sujit Mukherjee's book, he characterized such translations not only as linked literature, but the creation of a patriotic Indian audience. Translation as patriotism. Right. So, technology, markets, readership. So, one must also remember that this readership is almost completely urban now. That's because English education is more freely available in Indian cities, metropolises, rather than in the villages. Okay. And one must also note another important thing. While there is a demand for English, there is another, on the other hand, regional languages are being brought into prominence. There is a counter tendency also to give more representation to regional languages. Okay. So you have, after the 1990s, a large number of television channels coming up in Indian languages. Take a single language called Malayalam. I think there are more than 25 channels. Can you imagine? 25 channels brought to every home, or nearly every home, by satellite transmission. So this happens everywhere. This happens in many other languages in India as well. Malayalam is the obviously most notable example. Right. So on the one hand, you have the creation of regional language content in culture, the promotion of regional languages and their cultural artifacts. On the other hand, you have the counter tendency of an increasing English reading, English consuming audience, or an audience which consumes works in English. Right. So these two things are in a strange way converging in Indian writing in English translation. Because there are more than 20, now by the last count I think 24 languages have been recognized by the Sahitya Academy. The Constitution has recognized I think 22 languages. So it's not humanly possible for an Indian to learn all these languages, to know all these languages. So 21 languages besides your mother tongue, it's a stupendous task, which few people, if any, have achieved. So the next best thing is to get works in other languages through English translation. So you access these books through English translation. You get them freely distributed all over the country. Something which is propelled by a market demand. So if only 500 people read a translation from, let us say, Malayalam or Tamil or Gujarati or Bangla, a publisher won't print such a translation. On the other hand, if the number is substantially higher, if 5,000 or even 10,000 people read a translation, a publisher will certainly take every possible effort to bring it out. Okay, it's possible. And there are national agencies like the National Book Trust, Sahitya Academy, and other agencies like the Raja Ram Mohan Rai Foundation, which buy these books whether they are translations or original writings in English and other Indian languages, and distribute them through library networks. Right. And of course, you have the commercial publishers who would certainly love to make money out of selling these works. So again, all these factors come together in creating this body of literature called Indian Writing in English Translation, IWET, or as Rita Kothari would like to call it, Indian Literature in English Translation. Okay. Now, we are talking about the urban middle class. Roughly, at least 20 to 25 crores or 200 to 250 million Indians can probably, if they are interested, access literature written in English or translated into English. So this is the number, which you remember is higher than the number of English speaking people in Britain, and only slightly smaller than the number of English speaking people in the USA, America. Of course, the American population is now running up to 350 million, about 1/5 of which do not speak English, especially the Spanish-speaking immigrants from neighboring countries like Mexico. But it is still the predominant language in America, and everybody knows it. Even the people who do not speak English at home use English in public, in education. So India is inching closer in the number of people who can read English. Okay. So currently they are mostly located in Indian cities, but in course of time even villages might get acquire this kind of English education, or the readership in English that currently only Indian cities have. Okay. Now, there are two contradictory factors here at work. One is the idea that English is alien to Indian. Of course, we know that currently the predominant thinking goes the other way. Why is FLO, English and Foreign Languages University, named so? It's named so because it recognizes English not as a foreign language, not an Indian language, but with foreign origins in the near past. I say the near past because all Indian languages are actually foreign languages. Human beings did not rise from India. They migrated from Africa. Perhaps, long ago, I agree. 30,000 years downwards. The last wave of migration was about 5,000 years ago, 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. People who are called Indo-Aryans, who speak Indo-European languages like Hindi, Bangla, Punjabi, Gujarati, Rajasthani, Odia, Ahomi, etc. They came to India around 5,000 years ago. But before that, there were two waves of migration. The Dravidians came, Malayalam is a Dravidian language, they came around 10,000 years ago. And there was still an older wave of migration of people around 30,000 years ago. So these migrations still have relics in India. The Dravidians, of course, are very numerous. The first wave of people, who are called Austronesians, they can still be found in various parts of India as scattered tribal groups. Right. So, all Indian languages are actually foreign languages in this sense. But English is special in the sense that English is a colonial language brought to India by the British, who came first as traders, then as conquerors. So that's why English has this kind of uncertain status. It's not a foreign language. We don't want to call it a foreign language. At the same time, it has not yet become fully Indian. Okay. So national instincts led many people to denigrate English. The African writer Kakkuzhi-Maliakkal said that one should write only in one's mother tongue. In that famous essay called Decolonizing English. Was it Decolonizing English? Decolonizing Literature. I don't remember the exact title. But what he meant was that English is not a language in which people in third world countries should write it. They should write in their own language. Strange thing is that he wrote this essay in English. So nationalist impulses on the one hand, and countered by globalization impulses, which says that unless you cultivate English, unless you learn English, you are left without opportunities of employment, of a career. You can't do without English. English is a language which has to be learned if you are keen to improve your prospects for employment, to build a career. Right. So these are the two opposing tendencies in India. So as we now see, the second one is gaining prominence, where the importance of English is recognized. Okay. Now, a few minor points, interestingly. Who are the people who read Indian texts in English translation? Of course, we saw that the urban middle class, English educated urban middle class, who want to know something about the literature written in other linguistic communities in India, are the audience, target audience for such translation. But Rita Kothari points out another interesting aspect to this, another interesting characteristic of these readers of English. She says that there are readers who, although they might speak their mother tongue at home, has received absolutely no education in it, who can't read or write in their mother tongue. We know such cases commonly. Malayali children growing up in the UAE, for example, which is a large category. Now, so that's one. But what about Malayali children growing up in other Indian states? Malayali children in Tamil Nadu, in Gujarat, in Punjab, in Bengal. You don't get schools which teach Malayalam there. So they can speak Malayalam, but that also with some difficulty, unless their parents insist on speaking to them in Malayalam at home, which many parents don't do. So if they want to know about, if they want to learn about what is happening in their literature, the only way to do it is to read this literature in English translation, which is a very interesting thing. You are reading works written in your mother tongue. Yeah, I'm putting mother tongue in quotes, because mother tongue is not an exact expression. Mother tongue connects your language to your mother, which is not true. You can learn a language even if you don't have a mother. It's simply a figurative use, forget that. So in any case, people who want to know about the literature which their parents literature of the language which their parents spoke, they would definitely turn to English translation. So the role of English translation is this too, that it caters to people who cannot read what is called their mother tongue, right? So they too gain from this. They too gain from translation activities. Okay. Now, what exactly is the status of works originally written in English by Indian authors? Okay. Now, there is an argument that you cannot write in English and represent your culture properly. English is, of course, a different language. How can you represent what is happening in your village, in, let us say, Kozhikode, or Thrissur, or Kollam, in English? So does English have the capacity to bear the representative works of an Indian locale, society, community? Okay. But an author like Salman Rushdie proved, or an author like Arundhati Roy proved, that it can be possible through a process of what is called nativization of English. So we already saw that English has ceased to be a foreign language to us. It's not foreign. You can't exactly call English a foreign language. We are using it all the time. Now, to make it Indian, Rushdie uses a term, chutnification, chutney, chutnification of English, to make English a native language of India. And of course, Rushdie can be credited with doing that. When he wrote Midnight's Children, when Arundhati Roy wrote God of Small Things, how she brings alive a small village in Kottayam district, Aymanam, through her works. And she often uses Malayalam terms. Yeah. She even writes occasionally in a transliterated form of, almost transliterated form of Malayalam, or in what is called borrowals, okay, what are called calques, C-A-L-Q-U-E-S, literal translations of Malayalam phrases. Her novel is proved with such phrases. So this, we are nativizing English. So translation also has probably this task to perform. When you are translating into English, you are not translating for an American or a British audience. Instead, you are translating for an Indian audience. And therefore, your English in translation has to be nativized or post-colonized, okay, post-colonialized, I'm sorry. Right. And Rita Kothari also notes in passing that at one time there was a Queen's English tradition in India. A small group of people, either the British settled in India or Indians with a very high, in those days, level of education in English, who worked for the British, who worked in British companies, who held important positions in the colonial government. They used to cultivate what we call a Queen's English, English which is very close to the English spoken in Britain. There was such a culture. For example, if I tell you of something called Pier, P-I-E-R, you still find boats like this. It is actually where boats come ashore. It is not used now. We simply say landing. If you go to Talasheri, you will find this board. Talasheri Pier, P-I-E-R. It has become quite old-fashioned. So we are abandoning this kind of original, colonial, Queen's, native English. You can use all these terms. Instead, we are in the process of creating an Indian English. It's already on, So in the first semester, you looked at a book called Indian English by an author called Shailaja Pinkale. She was talking about how the language is being modified in India. How, to use Salman Rushdie's phrase, how it is being chutnified in India. Right. So this is a parallel process. The abandoning of native English or Queen's English and the creation of an Indian English. Okay. So at one and the same time, English is our window to globalization. Jawaharlal Nehru called it a window to the world. True. Okay. But a window which we are altering slightly. We are looking at the world, yes, through English, but our English. The English that we are fashioning out from the original Queen's English or native English. Okay. And it's becoming, as Rita Kothari pointed out, deracinated. Okay. The association of ethnicity with English as the language of the British, as a European language, is also disappearing. Okay. And in India, English is modified from all parts of the country. There is, of course, a Malayali English. There is a Bangla English. There is a Hindi English. It's often called Hinglish. So English is being modified. Okay. And there is no authority which can claim that only a particular kind of English is acceptable. Okay. And you often have what is called code mixing. What is code mixing? Using English and an Indian language simultaneously. No kara, no pada. You've seen that ad for a paint. Okay, if you use this paint, if there is a spot on the wall caused by a negligent child, okay, kicking a football or spilling a glass of milk, you can just wipe it off, and no kara and no pada will be left. Right. So this kind of code mixing is also very common in India. Okay, so Rita Kothari finally talks about, in conclusion, that that there is something called unity in diversity. Precisely what we have been talking about all the time. English translations from Indian languages posit, okay, this kind of unity in diversity. We have diversity as represented by regional languages, regional literatures. By translating these works into English, we create a link literature, as Sujit Mukherjee said, a link literature which shows that India is a country which has this dual characteristic of unity in diversity. Right. So the translators have attempted to do that, to do justice to this concept, not only by translating works, but also writing what is called extra-textual commentaries on the translation, such as something about the author, something about the author's background, something about the literature as a whole. All these things brought together. Okay. So, in other words, the post-colonial situation which now prevails. Okay. A number of things are standing together. Remember, globalization, the importance of English as an international language. At the same time, our urge to exert ourselves as post-colonial people. So our languages are also important. And you have to promote our language. At the same time, you have to make our languages, our literatures known to other communities. Okay. And particularly in India. We are not talking about a British reader of Bashir's Pathumayadu. Yes, although there have been British readers. R.E. Asher's translation of Pathumayadu, Dupupa Koranandarmu and Balyagala Sakhi as a single volume. Tales of Muslim stories from South India. Now, this translation was originally meant for a native English audience. Now, it's commonly read in India. There are more Indians reading Asher's translation than British or American. So, these translations, apart from such extra textual rewritings or prefaces to this translation, introductions to this translation, which tell readers what kind of literary system, what kind of culture this translation springs from. There are also good reviewers. Okay. Good reviewers or articles, writing articles about the book in periodicals. Okay. Now online too. You can, after Rita Kothari wrote this book, online reviews are increasing. You not only got online reviews, you also have digital copies of these books available. You know, after let us say selling the book for some time, an author or the copyright holder, it might be the publisher or the translator, decides to put it up on a site like archive.org, archive.org, for everybody to read, and accompanied by a review of the book. So this is getting very common. Publishing on the one hand, and writing introductions and prefaces which tell readers about what kind of a book this is, where it came from, how does the culture look like, how does the culture from which it's from looks like, what are other authors who can be compared to this author. All such things are being done on the one hand, and on the other hand you have good reviews of the work written. So let's go back and find that there are two types of publishers in India, chiefly. One, of course, the official academic state-sponsored publishers like Sahitya Akademi or the National Book Trust or similar organizations, National Translation Mission, which translate works written into other languages. And on the other hand, we have private commercial publishers like Macmillan, Oxford, India, who also translate, get works translated and publish them with wide advertisements. So altogether, this is the picture that we get today. The democratization of Indian society, the representative character of Indian society as reflected in its politics, its literatures, and even in translation. Right? It tells people about what other cultures look like, what other literatures look like, what other authors look like. Okay. Thank you.